Thank you, Patch. Appreciate the introduction. Thank you to all the other speakers, and Lee, thanks for coming out. Moji, really just huge gratitude to each and every one of you for bringing the energy and helping to lift us all up. I am so excited to be here tonight. I have dark hair and facial hair. I'm wearing a black shirt with a grape arbor as my virtual background. It's not quite so virtual though, because it is harvest. That's what we're here for. So I'm going to go ahead and harvest some of these grapes right here. Just pick them right out of that vine, bring them out of the screen, go ahead and eat one. Luscious grapes right from my grape arbor. So yeah, very refreshing, delicious. Thank you so much. So I'm going to come back inside and show you some of my slides. Just need to change my virtual background. Okay, now I'm back inside. Did want to sorry, just need to change my timer here. Okay, so yeah, United Student Leaders, just so excited that they put this logo together, and it really speaks to the values that they have: climate action, educational reform, equity, and intersectionality. And I could spend my entire talk, I could spend 10 times my talk just talking about this amazing group of youth leaders, the first few of which have now graduated and are moving on to their other parts of their lives. And so it's really pretty amazing. They just did their climate strike school walkout, and also after campaigning for 2.5 years, they finally had a hearing at the Island County Board of Commissioners regarding their climate emergency campaign. The commissioners refused to declare a climate emergency. However, there was a partial win. They did pass a resolution on climate that was based on the youth's resolution and is the strongest statement the county's ever made on climate. And they have a plan to move forward with some goals and a climate action plan in the next year. And hopefully, with some additional radical organizing, they might still get that climate emergency win in the future. So this year for me has been a lot about the just transition framework, and a lot of my presentations in the past I've done that have involved the just transition framework from Climate Justice Alliance and Movement Generation. And it really is this framework that talks about how do we get from the extractive economy to the regenerative economy. And many of you that I know on the call here have heard me speak about this. But a lot of times just in the past, I kind of gloss over it in like a minute or two because I had a lot of other slides to go over, or just kind of take it as a given that everyone knew about it. And this year I wanted to go deep. So I spent the entire year so far working on being able to have a lot more time and space for it. And I now have a 2-hour workshop that I can do on just the Just Transition Framework. And I am so excited to have brought that to some youth groups. I brought it to several JEDI trainings, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion trainings for the solar industry, and half a dozen solar companies, as well as multiple summer programs for youth. And I also had the opportunity to speak at the Progressive Educator Network conference about 2 weeks ago. And just in all this work, I've been able to develop, actually, here's a picture from the intersectional student leaders retreat. So this is some USL kids, some kids from some of the other summer programs. And here we are on Whidbey Island, and Zarna came out to help throw down on this retreat on intersectionality and so many important topics like respectability politics, tokenism, and just went really deep on intersectionality, and also a chance to heal from the triple pandemics. And through all this, just hot off the press, the ink is still drying on this one. The Just Transition Framework is now vector-based. It's our own kind of interpretation of it that's essentially a knockoff of just Climate Justice Alliances, but it's in a way that I can now present it and create adaptations of it. So we now have the ability to show just the regenerative economy on its own, pull out pieces of it and use this in a more modular way. So the other thing is just some lessons learned and kind of how are we going to move forward as a movement, as a collective and whatnot, is really around shared responsibility. And so I had this kind of moment of awareness of that prior to the pandemic, there were a lot of folks who actually, speaking of Zero Waste Washington, had attended a Zero Waste Washington event on Whidbey Island prior to the pandemic. And some folks kind of stepped up and said that they were going to take the lead on creating a Zero Waste Whidbey movement. And I thought, okay, they've got that handled. I'll take care of other things, and they'll do the zero waste and I'll do other things. And found out that they were not as effective as they purported to be, or that they were going to be, and that additional support was needed. So I stepped in and helped organize reconnecting with the folks who were making that pledge and bringing them along, and not just, you know, like shaming them or anything like that. And so we founded Repurpose, and it's about policy change, it's about community education, and it's about actual action in our community. So here's a picture of us, of some of the middle school kids at the Alternative Learning Experience Program, who are working with a city council member and other Repurpose folks to get the city of Langley to pass the first reading of a zero waste ordinance that is modeled after one that Zero Waste Washington folks have been supporting in the city of Bainbridge Island, Burien, and in Bellingham. And now I'm currently working with middle school kids in the now in the 2022-23 school year to help move that forward, to hopefully get a second reading and get that passed into law. And so it's a big lift. There's a lot of pushback from the local business community, and we need to figure out how to bring them along. Mochi, maybe you and I can hop on and think of some ways that have worked for you in working with some small businesses. I do want to take a step back and just acknowledge, as excited as I am, I've also just been dealing with a lot of challenges. I won't get into any of them, but I do want to share this graphic. This is something that a dear friend of mine who did go on that, who was a part of that storytelling collective to the tar sands, made this custom artwork. And there is a kind of a little bit of a trigger warning around this. It's very emotional. It's just want to remind us to breathe and remind everyone that we have bodies and that to ground ourselves. But this is a very meaningful graphic that I have always wanted to have and be able to share. So it says, the caption on it is, humans have killed off 2/3 of all wildlife in just 50 years. And the graphic is of three elephants, 2 of which are floating toward a door in space with a starry background. And so there's actually an update to this. We're now at 70% of wildlife killed. That's up from 67% just 2 years ago. We are absolutely in mass extinction. We are absolutely far worse off than a lot of folks want to acknowledge. And this is very clear with all the wildfires and hurricanes and all the flooding and all these major impacts. And so we are in a challenging space. And I do think that we can have hope, but hope comes from action, that we need to find ways to support each other, find ways to think not just about what we're all working on, but think about how it is that we're working, how are we treating each other, to think about that kind of mutual aid, that mutual support. So not just, oh, you know, these people are handling zero waste, so I'm just going to go do this other thing. Like maybe I could have stayed in touch with them and we'd be further along than we are now. Now we're back together, got in touch with some of these other organizers, and now we're supporting each other in advancing zero waste on Whidbey Island. So folks have been wanting to hear this big announcement, and I'm very excited to provide another example of harvesting the fruits of labor that at the beginning of becoming an organizer with For the People, I launched Rapid and Just Climate Action RJCA, which is about this project of how do we stop global warming by 2030 and how do we scale this, like on the one hand, individual action, recycling, LED lights, to the other extreme of complete policy transformation. And there's this kind of dialectic that is a false one that we either do individual action or we do massive policy change. And I think there's a huge space in between those two. And so as Patch mentioned, I did these teams working with some of the folks on this call a couple of years ago, and all this work and building together and building systems and building for the people together have culminated in a new campaign that I'm launching right now with you all called Kicking Gas. And the pun is intended. So this is a campaign to get 100 homes on South Whidbey Island or on Whidbey Island off of fossil fuels, propane, fuel oil, and also wood. And that these are homes that are in hard to reach markets that it is especially difficult to transition off of fossil fuels, both for the equipment itself that's more complicated than electric, but also because our investor-owned utility does not provide incentives to for homes to be getting off of fossil fuels. They only provide incentives for people who already are on electricity to transition from onto ductless heat pumps, which are more efficient. And so we will be able to get folks off of fossil fuels. The price for propane and fuel oil is actually very high. People are actually paying more to pollute their own homes, as well as polluting with greenhouse gas emissions. And so we have a grant from the Washington State University Energy Program, the Community Energy Efficiency Program, for, drum roll, $1 million. For the People has just won a grant for $1 million. And this will help us to transition 100 homes. They will be providing direct support to help buy down the cost of folks transitioning off of fossil fuels. This is what I've been wanting to do the entire time, and I am so excited to do this work and to be doing this work in coalition and in partnership and bringing along Salish Sea Cooperative Finance that we've partnered with on the Community Care Debt Relief Program, which supports BIPOC community organizers with student debt relief. We are now also in partnership bringing on this way that we can provide community care in reducing carbon, decarbonizing these homes. So that's going to be the work that I'm going to be doing over the next year. And we don't actually have a contract yet, so it's still a little scary, but we did launch the effort. We kicked off the effort on October 10th. We are 12 days old. We have a website ready to go in the next week. And on next Thursday, we're having our first launch event. It's going to be an alpha release at the Penn Cove Brewery on Whidbey Island. If any of you are on Whidbey Island and want to come visit, just RSVP to me at my email address and we'll see you there. That is an alpha release though. It's just, we're still building it as we go. We're building it as we start actually decarbonizing homes. So thank you so much. I think I'll leave it there.